Welcome, my friends. This is Maniacal Incorporated, greeting you at the front gates of Her Majesty's Prison Maze. The alarms have just gone off for the start of a new day. Prisoners are heading for the showers in one of the most secure and modern prison facilities in Western Europe. At least it was when it was built in the 1970s. So this is based on a real historical prison that played a major role in the Troubles in Northern Ireland. And using some plans and some blueprints, I decided to see if it would be possible to recreate it. And this is what I ended up with. Which, based on aerial footage, at the very least, is a very accurate, I would like to think, a very accurate representation of what the maze, Her Majesty's Prison Maze, specifically the cellular section, looked like. So over here, you would have had the compounds, what were known as the compounds of Lankesh, Nissan Hut compounds, where until 1980, some prisoners had special category status. And of course, these are the H blocks that would have housed many of the most notorious and most famous prisoners, paramilitaries during the Northern Ireland Troubles. Here's H7. Where prisoners escaped from in 1983, basically got into a food van here, drove out the door, down through the segment gates, and nearly out through the main gate. Here is H3, H5, and H4, where the hunger strikes, the blanket protest, the dirty protest, and the hunger strikes were centered. Over here you have H6, which was briefly shared by Republican INLA prisoners and Loyalist LVF prisoners, to rather disastrous results. And this then is the admin complex. All of the buildings here are fairly accurate representations of the buildings that were there at the time. This is the hospital block, the actual hospital block. That's where the kitchen would have been, where the laundry would have been, where the prison processing was. There's a couple of buildings that I have no idea what they did, so they have been turned into storage. Tons and tons of storage. So I have a couple of things to do to get this prison ready, to maybe put it up on the Steam Workshop. And also what I want to do is to just kind of see what a day in the prison actually looks like now that I have got it finally finished. And there's another small little challenge, tiny little challenge. Let's bring up the bank balance. So it took me 251 days to build this thing, 250 days. And yeah, 12.8 million is what it cost. At its peak, I was losing 75,000 a day. I was losing $1 million roughly every 13 to 15 days. So let's see if we can do anything about getting that down. I might increase the amount of prisoners that we take in. That's pretty much all I can do, really. Workshops aren't generating a lot of money. Let's see what we can do. Let's see what we can do. We're down in H3. We're seeing prisoners flooding out and heading off to work. With the non-conforming blocks during the hunger strikes, you would not have seen this. Prisoners would not have been leaving the block at all under any circumstances, but in some of the blocks, they were what were described as working blocks, and prisoners would either work in the wing, or they would be taken to the workshops. There were a number of workshops around the place, so some prisoners will be coming down here, others will be going up to the vocational training centre, others will be heading for the kitchens, but they would have been driven around in vans. So the prisoners would have gotten into a van with blacked out windows, and they would have been taken. If they were going to the kitchens, they would have actually been taken along a road that should run here, and down to here, and they'd be probably let out, I'm thinking, or else they might have come in through the top segment up here. Visitors, actually, regardless of where the visitors were coming from, so even if they were coming from H6, they would still come out and down this way, and down, and across this road, and they'd be let off here at the back, and they would go in that direction. But we can see all the prisoners from H3 leaving. Again, like I said, so much land was bought. This prison is massive. The actual land layout is massive. So by the time they leave here and walk all the ways up here, many of them are exhausted. Many of them are absolutely exhausted. I cut down all the trees in the complex, which is why we have so many trees, because a lot of prisoners mentioned, oh, we got a bit of a fight. A lot of prisoners mentioned that they never saw any trees in the compound. The place was grey. Ward, you divil. You absolute divil. This guy's on permanent lockdown. Most of the people here in Supermax are on permanent lockdown. One of the only ways to get into Supermax is by murdering somebody in the prison. I do not take Supermax prisoners. I'm only taking minimum and medium security. So anyone here in maximum security in H1 or Supermax in H2, where the food, I have been told, is both tasty and tempting. The only way they can get in here is by basically murdering their way up the ranks. The regime will send murderers straight to Supermax, and if you assault officers, you get pushed up from minimum security to medium to max. Anyway, we're inside here. There's no fight going on. Let's see. Oh, boys, the tasers are off. Hoggerty. Oh, Hoggerty's a divil. Hoggerty is an absolute divil. Some of these people, I know them far too well. Cantlow, over there in the right-hand corner. He's another divil. So, some of these would have come into the prison at a point in time when I didn't have very many of the blocks built, and I wasn't able to segregate them properly, and it led to absolute security nightmares. Cantlow, I think, murdered 3 people before I got the ability to segregate him over here. But now he's in the good boy wing. See, the good boy, he's in this wing with the nice beds, because he's been good. He's been good with the last while. Fair play to him, so we can't give out to him too much. And just while we're actually up here looking at H1, so I was saying about the working blocks. So H3, H4, and H5 now are working blocks because the prisoners there can go and work about the prison. H1 and H2 are not. So this airlock here is for staff only. You are only getting out that door if you are staff. So the prisoners here are trapped within this block. They do not go and work. Hoggerty. Was it worth it? Was it worth it? I should send him to Supermax. So the prisoners here cannot get out of the block. Realistically, they shouldn't even be able to get out of the... They should not be going through the circle. But they're going back and forth to attend classes and to use the other common rooms, to use the other yards and things like that. I do wish I could segregate them to their wings a bit more. Maybe somebody has an idea on how that could be achieved. The other thing I wanted to point out was, again, I keep going on about how big the prison is in terms of land. I can't get water from one end of the map to the other. So what I've done is I've used a building here, or a room here. You'll see it on plans of the H blocks. It was only accessible from an outside door. I've used that for the utilities in every single wing. I've no idea what was actually in there, but it seems to make sense. But we've just barely enough room to get in enough power to keep the block going. Just barely. Just barely. If somebody plugged in a toaster, lads, the whole block would go down. But down here at the very bottom of the prison is H4. I will just zoom out again for a second. H1, H2, H3, H4, H5, and then way up here is 6, 7, and 8. So it goes around in kind of a strange circle, but way down here at the bottom in H4, across from that was a series of buildings. So this wall should actually come down at an angle, and this road that I've put in should continue out in this direction. I was going to, put in the staggered fence all the ways up, but I thought, look, it doesn't make a difference. But there was a bit more space here, and there was actually a couple of buildings here. One of them was a furniture shop, another was a metal fabricator. There was a church down there as well. But what I've stuck in here is the library and the tuck shop, or the shop. These didn't actually exist as physical buildings in the H blocks. They would be set up in the classrooms. So a van would travel around every once in a while, and it would set up a table. I think it would set up a table for the tuck shop, but another van had shelves, tiny, small shelves that could be wheeled around the place, and that was the library, and it would travel from block to block to block. Down here at the bottom of H4 is our minimum, no, not our minimum, our protected security prisoners. I should actually check, when is... Did we get an intake recently? We must have gotten an intake recently. Let's come over to solitary confinement. Has Hoggerty made it down here yet? He hasn't. Hoggerty, for all the trouble that he causes, is one of my confidential informants. So this is our solitary confinement block, which is kind of outside of the maze proper. I kind of pretend that this is part of the compounds, because I think that's where solitary confinement was. How solitary confinement operated historically was that they just took away all your furniture. They just took out your bed. That was really all you had. You were just left with your mattress, and you stayed in your room for 3 days. It was called being on the boards. They did have an actual isolated solitary confinement as well, but I don't know where that was. I think it was in the compounds. But if Hoggerty comes down, we could activate him and bring him to security. If not, we'll come back up to H1 and we'll see who's around. Who's around to talk to me? We'll go to intelligence, informants. There's nobody in an easy position to access at the moment. There is. That is Stone Lake. He doesn't have great coverage. There's Reardon. Reardon, deadly. Deadly. Reardon's deadly. So we'll take Reardon to security, which is... every block has a room that's marked security, but realistically it was the principal officer's office. So we're still waiting for Reardon to be picked up. What's going on in here? It's the alcoholics group therapy, and somebody decided to go mad in the middle of it. So as you can see, there's not much group therapy going on, considering that that we only have two desks, and you can see somebody took the uniform off of Wagstaff and gave him an orange wand, so he's going away off to medium security for attacking a prisoner. Has somebody escorted poor old Reardon? No. Chronic understaffing. Absolutely chronic understaffing. Actually, the size of the prison absolutely just breaks the rules of Prison Architect, because everyone is constantly exhausted from the distance that they have to walk. For a while I did think about maybe just recreating this section over here, just forgetting about all of these other blocks, because the amount of effort required for people to walk around is a bit much. And that's why I have so many staff, and that is why so many of them, what are we at the moment? 162 are exhausted. That's both worrying and very accurate. Okay, so we were waiting for about 3 hours for somebody to take Reardon to the security room, and eventually I gave up and I just got a different prisoner. Necromamida. Another absolute divil who has caused nothing but trouble since getting in here, and what they can now tell us is all of the snitches. So you can see down here we have, this place is just full of protected, what are they, protective category prisoners. Snitches, law enforcement, and if they end up anywhere else they will be murdered, so we need to start moving them to better places. And by better places, I mean protective custody. Gets himself a nice yellow jacket. Did I see a few more? So I think that's actually it for the day. I think that's our one and only protective category. Prisoner. Now, Contraband is quite interesting because of the way historically the maze itself was constructed. It had fences between all of the actual blocks, and it had a fence here. And with the addition of very few walls which historically weren't there, I've been able to cut all of the prisoners off from the outside fence. So they actually can't really get to Contraband that easily. That doesn't stop them, though. That doesn't stop them. And in general, I don't care about Contraband. These guys have very little, if anything. But in general, I don't care about Contraband. The one and only thing that I care about, and I know that there's one around, I can see it right now. We'll just check the rest of the prisoners first of all. The one and only thing that I care about is that. So we will search the cell and we will deactivate Necromimida for another day. I don't know if you saw, this is one of the reasons why I had to deactivate the gangs. Because this guy arrived at the prison, I think on day 249. Extremely strong, extremely tough, extremely volatile, stoical, extremely deadly, fearless, instigator, and a gang leader. So he was put into permanent lockdown. Because I think he murdered somebody after coming into the prison. I put him on permanent lockdown, and that of course drove the rest of the gang members absolutely mad. And I was like, no, I'm not having this. I won't say it's... I found that there was very little I could do about it, and yeah, sure, it would be historically accurate to have riots, rolling riots going on in this place, but I said, do you know what, no. I just want an easy life. I've 12.8 million to try and clear. We have, what are we into? We're into 6 o'clock, so there's a bit of stuff going on around the place. People have been moving a lot of the timber around. Some of it's being cut up. We're not making a huge amount of money from the workshops. I think it's just because it takes so long to get to them, and so long to get anything done, so long to get somebody trained, so long to get anyone away from there. So there's not a huge amount being done, but even with just 430 or so prisoners, there is a good chunk of money being made by bringing low and medium security prisoners in and by getting them released. So I am putting a bit of work into the programs. There's a good chunk of them going on. It's 6 o'clock. Are we in luck? Will we be lucky enough? No. Oh, yes, we are. Fantastic. Puppies. Do the puppies have names? No. The prisoners have names. The puppies don't. When he ran in, I actually thought he was trying to run out the door with a dog. Where are they getting the... Aren't they just pulling them out of the walls? Yes, is the answer. The success rate for this course at the moment, I think, is about 2%. I don't understand how prisoners can fail at petting dogs, but they are. The low and the minimum and medium security prisoners aren't all that suppressed. So I could understand if it was like max security, but the low and medium aren't all that suppressed. So I'm kind of surprised that they're failing so miserably. This is the hospital block, and it's where historically the hospital block was located. These are the wings on which this is the wing on which the 1981 hunger strikers died. Down here would have been the X-ray room down at the very bottom corner, and then the a dark room for processing X-rays. So I mean, there's a lot of rooms in here that you couldn't really replicate. So I just stuck in staff rooms. There's staff rooms everywhere in this complex. But there were indeed cells up here. So cell 8 is where Bobby Sands died. When you come in the main door of the hospital, to the left would have been a meeting room. And this is where the prisoners would have been taken for meetings with the likes of Jerry Adams and Denny Morrison. And it's where they would have met with their families when they were strong enough to do so. When the hunger strike came to an end, they held a meeting in the room of one of the prisoners who had been on the strike for the longest, because he was too weak to leave his cell. But when they were strong enough, they would have actually had meetings in here. Then I stuck like psychologist's office in the rest of the places. Stuck a staff canteen. Is that a staff canteen or a normal canteen? It is a staff canteen. Just basically to take up some of the space, because I did end up with quite a lot of empty space. We're up in A and B wing of H7, where the 1983 escapes were planned. And actually in H7 I've left the control room, so if you watch that other video I did, I talked about the control room. I've left the control room as it was in 1983. And what happened then, afterwards, is that it was changed to this kind of a format. So the doors were removed to outside of the circle. The entrance was removed to the outside. So that was after 1983. But beforehand, the entrance was in the circle. And of course, what happened rather famously is that Jerry Kelly pointed a gun through the grill and held the officer there hostage, effectively. We have an overdose, so it's a bit of a sprint. Every block has a medical office or a medical room, and initially I think I only put one bed in there, but from time to time we had so many prisoners overdosing that I put in 3. And there's a doctor on duty deployed to every single infirmary. So, like, I pointed out the hospital block a while ago. No doctors in the hospital block. The actual rooms are not infirmary rooms, because there's no point in trying to run from way over here. That was something I learned. That was a mistake I learned quite early on. The worst is when, for some reason, and I have seen it, where a guard decides somebody has had an overdose over here. Let's take him out. Let's run past the infirmary. Let's run down here, and let's get to an infirmary. Oh, he's died. So that happens from time to time as well. But back up to H7. Like I said, 1983 escape. And you have the just a normal jail door, or grills as they would have been called. And the prisoners were able to take control of the block here using guns that were, or I should say the circle, which is what this rectangle was known as. And they were able to take control of the circle, and yeah, basically they had guns. They were able to hold up the staff in the staff room and take control of the control room. And once that was mitigated, the control room, every control room has telecommunications and emergency alarms and everything that connects it to this room here, the very heart of the entire maze complex. And all the red flashing lights, like I said, quite accurate. Lots of tired, lots of exhausted people by the early 1980s. No, not the early 80s, early 90s. This place would have been heavily understaffed, but it was very modern for its time. I stuck a mail room in here because, again, didn't really know where else to stick it. I could have probably, like, converted one of these buildings into just nothing but a mail room. And it's 2 in the morning. Yeah, 2 in the morning, and there's officers in the social club having a great old time. Boys, oh boys, what kind of a party must be going on here? 26,000 profit a day. Where the hell did that come from? Anyway, the prison staff had their own social club on the grounds. One of the clubs, or one of the kind of the groups that met there, was the Yeehaw Club, which was the Country and Western. I bet that's a surprise. They were supposed to have been mad. But yeah, the guards in the 70s, they would come here and drink heavily. Quite often in the middle of the day before going back on duty. But I have a video game and movie club, book club, the chess club, and the dining club. Very fancy. Right across from the warden's office. And all of the offices, most importantly, all of the offices have pictures of the Queen. Absolutely essential for any British office. I think the reason we have such a big daily profit at the moment is because of exports. I cut down a ton of trees, and basically while they're being taken away, we're being told we have a ton of profit. That will go back to a very low number soon, but yeah, there you go. There's the prison value, minus 9 million. Just in case nobody guessed, I put on unlimited funds before I started this. I have no idea how long it would take to build this prison if you didn't have that on. I didn't take any of the grants or anything like that. I started with 0 funds, and we got to minus 12.8 million. We are in H3, and the security, or the danger, is rising. It should go down once they've all had their shower. Historically, of course, prisoners did not have toilets in their cells. They did not have showers in their cells in the real Maze prison. I've kind of replicated that a slight bit up in H8. So I have an entire wing which is kept in the conditions it would have been... You silly devil. The conditions that a wing would have been kept on the dirty protest. But H8 was never involved in the dirty protest. There was never H3, 4, and 5 were on the dirty protest. It's just that as I was building this place, I ended up kind of getting this complex built late. So I had protective custody, minimum security, medium security, and then I was like, once I get these built, this is where Max and Supermax will go. So I said, right, we'll just stick in a kind of a demo wing here onto H8, and of course this is where we got some people. Oh, there's a search going on. This is where the big parade was held in 1990, where loyalist prisoners marched up and down the hallway for the anniversary, the 300th anniversary of the Battle of the Boyne. So somebody's been caught, he's making paper mache drums or something like that. I tried to put up some bunting. Dragon body. That's what passes for bunting. Now, in just 4 minutes, we are going to have 23 prisoners, I think, admitted to the prison. The only problem is we have a bit of a backlog. Okay, we have an empty supply truck. Then we have a supply truck with 2 ingredients, Okay, so some of them are full at the very least. Trying to set up somewhere for exports and deliveries. Vehicles would have driven into the compound. Food lorries would have driven into the compound. It was driven in and out. One was used for the 1983 escape. So trying to set up a delivery area outside, I didn't know, because initially I had, I think, garbage in one of these. I had exports and deliveries. I think this was maybe... We have another overdose. God damn you all. I think this was probably deliveries, exports, and garbage. And what would happen, of course, is the van would stop here on the road. And somebody would get out, and they would run down here, and they would run across, and they would run up, and they would run into the building, and they would run out of the building, they would run down, and they would run across, and they would run up, and they'd put the thing... And you've just this massive backlog. So I never really ended up in a position of building proper facilities for deliveries and garbage and exports and things. Do we still have people overdosing? Guys, we're beginning to see I have a mod which has British prison buses and British prison officer uniforms. That's why they're in white with black ties, but then of course they're wearing the bulletproof vests or the stab-proof vests, so it doesn't really make much of a difference. The other major issue with the size of the prison is prisoners trying to get to and from the visitation room and the parole room, and then of course they show up. There's nobody on site to actually check them. There's a couple of people deployed. Somebody's going to check him and see what he has. But yeah, most of the people who are getting visits, so there's how many? 55 visitors on site. Most of them just sit there for a while and then leave, because nobody comes to them. The parole officers, most of them just sit there on their own as well. That guy came to visitation, went through the what would you call it? The metal detector. Metal detector went off, he was checked, and he left. Great. Again, historically, prisoners would have been driven to here. So when Billy Wright was murdered in H6, you might think that he would have gotten into a van, or that he would have been waiting in a van that would have taken him in this direction, but no, the van that he was killed in the back of was going to take him out this way, and down, around here, and park out the back, and prisoners would enter from the rear here, and visitors from the front. So it might be worth at some point in time putting in a road to at least speed them up a bit. I might have to check that at some stage. Are we getting our prisoners? I think we are. Yeah, it's going to take ages to process these guys. It's going to take absolute ages, but we are approaching. We are approaching 12.7 million. So it was 12.8 2 days ago. We're making 100,000 every 2 or 3 days. That doesn't make any sense. I think that's mostly because of the exports. But yeah, I think it is possible to make this building not cost negative, I don't know. Basically to get it to zero. I think it is possible. I think that's a bit of a challenge, is speed run the Maze prison to profitability. Turn that minus figure around. How long would that take to clear $12.8 million worth of debt? So we have just missed the last mass of the evening, but Green isn't leaving. Green is demanding more mass. Actually, somebody else is coming for mass as well. Maybe they're just chilling out in the chapel. And I think we can bring our visit to Her Majesty's prison maze to an end as more people come in. The chapel today is still standing, and H6 is still standing. Most of the admin area, bar the visitation room, is still standing. This building was actually demolished, and a new set of buildings which are still standing were put up here. But other than that, everything else is gone. So all of these blocks, these would have been sports fields, the vocational training center, the gym, these blocks, the buildings that would have been down here, all of the compounds, and the management buildings, they are all gone. So it was one of the reasons why I wanted to do this, was to see could we actually recreate the maze and get a look of the H blocks as a living, breathing prison, with prisoners and prison staff milling about. For me, it's given me a great understanding of the security problems that were faced in trying to maintain a prison regime here. And it's given me a great understanding also of the challenges that the prisoners faced in attempting to overcome that prison regime. Because, of course, that's the one big thing that kind of hangs over this prison. It was designed to convince paramilitary prisoners that they were criminals. And eventually that failed, I think is probably the best thing to say. The concessions that were made to prisoners over time basically recognized them as political prisoners. So the function that the maze was created for, by and large, failed, but it had a massive role to play in eventually bringing the Troubles to an end. And many of the prisoners here took a very active role in bringing the conflict to an end and ushering in the peace process. So it's a really important facility. I'm not too sure if anything is going to be done with the real facility. It is kind of crumbling. Most of the buildings over here are protected structures now, especially the hospital, but people would be very worried that the wing on which the hunger strikers died would become a kind of a shrine. So some people want to see it preserved, some people say just knock it and send it back into the depths of history. But if you ever wonder what the maze looked like on a busy day with 430-ish prisoners wandering around, you can always head to the Steam Workshop and download this file and see what it looked like for yourself. I like using video games for looking at history. You've probably figured that out by now, I hope. So I have a couple of other projects similar to this, or in a similar vein, again, using video games and using them to look at aspects of Irish history. So CK3 has been a big use for that so far. I've looked at a bit of Irish history in Empire of Sin, and I'm actually going to be going back to that again at a later point in time. And there's a couple of other games not made by Paradox. Wow, isn't that shocking? Or not published by Paradox at the very least. There's a couple of other games that I intend to look at as well in the future. So if you enjoy this, and if you enjoy this type of content, do please subscribe if you haven't done so already. Give the video a now like. It'll summon the YouTube algorithm and send it out to more people. Check out the links to the Discord if you have any questions about this episode or any of the other stuff that I'm doing. You can always drop them over there. Thank you for joining me on this episode, and I will talk to you again in future.